When my beloved treehouse was demolished by the HOA queen, I didn't just rebuild. I ignited a rebellion that asked, how far will I go to reclaim my creativity? I stormed home, heart racing faster than a jackrabbit on a caffeine high, fueled by a mix of disbelief and rising fury. Images of my treehouse flooded my mind like a never-ending montage of childhood memories, crayon-drawn maps of imaginary lands, whispered secrets shared with the wind, and the comforting smell of wood and sunshine cradling my creative spirit. But all I saw now was a muddy patch of earth, a brutal graveyard of dreams and hours of labor, courtesy of that tiresome troll with a clipboard. Karen Blythe, the self-appointed queen of suburbia, had done the unthinkable, wielding her HOA pen like a sledgehammer, oblivious to the emotional wreckage she left behind. Was I furious? You bet your last soft-serve cone I was, as I stood there, fists clenched and eyes squinting at the devastation. I could practically hear the distant droning of Mr. Clandestine, the HOA president, rambling on about city ordinances and the decency of conformity. His monocle glinting in the sunlight was a sight I wanted to snatch off his nose and toss into the nearest lake. This was not merely a fight against a treehouse. This was a battle against a mind-numbing, spirit-crushing wave of entitlement. I quickly texted Max, my trusty handyman neighbor and partner in rebellion. They bulldozed my treehouse. We need to build it back, on top of the HOA office. I hit send, laughter bubbling at the absurdity of it all. Wouldn't that send Karen's perfectly coiffed hair spiraling into a messy frizz of rage? A lightning bolt of vindictive inspiration surged through me, and within minutes, Max came sauntering over, plaid shirt flapping in the breeze, as if he had just leaped out of a bohemian cartoon. Didn't take her long to mess with your playground, huh? I don't even need a latte to feel the burn, he chuckled, his beard quivering. We slapped hands together like a couple of superhero sidekicks, ready to embark on our reckless construction quest. Armed with a truckload of lumber, a spirit of revenge, and an assortment of tools, we plotted the most glorious treehouse rebirth the HOA had ever seen. But this wasn't just about the treehouse. It was also about unleashing the epic drama of creativity right over Karen's iron-fisted reign. Construction day arrived, and with it, a congregation of curious neighbors gathered like spectators at a circus. I stood before them, cargo shorts, bright graphic tee, and an unmistakable sense of pride bursting through my veins. Today, we build a lighthouse of rebellion, a monument to DIY neighborly spirit, right atop the very throne of Karen's despotic regime. What do we say to oppression? I barked, raising a power drill like it was a torch of freedom. No more monotony, no more protocol. We are ready to rock this HOA's world. A mix of hesitant giggles and enthusiastic cheers erupted from the crowd. Watching people get caught up in the moment reminded me that even in the most orderly, uptight neighborhood, there was always room for a little chaos. With Max by my side, we sawed and hammered with reckless abandon, blasting music from the rickety speakers we had dragged along. I may have taken the term roof-raising party a bit literally, while constructing an elevated palace of vibrant colors that would make any rainbow envious. Layers and layers of paint danced across the weathered wood like a riotous carnival, transforming an abrupt act of destruction into the boldest statement piece in the neighborhood. It was cathartic, a joyous rebellion enveloped in paint-splattered shirts and muddy boots. Sure, some neighbors raised eyebrows while others smirked at the whimsy, but I could feel the collective spirit of defiance growing stronger by the hour. But all of this glorious creation was equally met with Karen's finest level of bureaucratic fury, manifested in her stormy persona and a relentless barrage of complaints. You know that's an illegal structure, right? She screeched from her manicured lawn, looking even more privileged and indignant than usual. The sight of her flaming demands ignited a fresh wave of laughter from the crowd as I leaned over the balcony I had hastily put together. "Oh, Karen, sweetie," I called, twirling in mock elegance. "Isn't it just delightful to live in a world where art can flourish? Not just the art of compliance." The neighborhood erupted in laughter, while Karen gaped at us like we had just upset a sacred law of nature. Conservative blouse and all, she was about to be at the center stage of a war against creativity. Fueled by a combination of artistic passion and sheer defiance, I knew that this improvised treehouse atop their dominion would serve as a beacon of resilience, a sharp rebuttal against the tyranny of HOA regulations. What would they do next? Send a cease and desist letter via drone? I like to think I could almost hear the collective cheers echoing in short ripples of joyous rebellion as my neighbors began to realize something very important. Sometimes, the only way to push back against absurdity is to rise above it. What could possibly go wrong next? As the vibrant colors of my new treehouse gleamed in the sun, I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through me that rivaled the caffeinated high from my morning coffee binge. My neighbors had transformed from skeptical onlookers to actual supporters, and they grabbed paintbrushes and roller trays with the fervor of participants at a festival. With Max at my side, we orchestrated this grand rebellion like a live art performance. It felt less like a conventional construction project and more like we were flinging colorful paint onto an otherwise bland canvas forged by the dreary HOA. I can just picture it. Next year's neighborhood calendar, the Great Treehouse Rebellion, Max exclaimed, chuckling in between applying neon strokes to a board. It occurred to me that perhaps this was what community really meant, banding together to fight a curmudgeonly overlord with creativity as our armor. Are you really going to leave that guy a note? I quipped at Max, who held a spray can menacingly as if it were a sword. He had just suggested we spray paint our own HOA rules, along with some humorous illustrations of Karen doing the chicken dance. I could practically hear Karen's indignation from across the street as she seethed in her perfectly trimmed garden. Just imagining her aghast face at the sight of colorful graffiti showcasing her inadequacies in the world of fun was worth it. Hey, if I get us all a fine, we could create a fund for the first annual paint-off against HOA fines, Max suggested, his laughter echoing through the day's chaos. It was impossible not to join in the mirth. We were transforming the negative energy of an outrageous act into a celebration of vibrant freedom. Midway through our creative explosion, I heard the unmistakable sound of Karen's siren call, her voice elevated above the din of our camaraderie like a cold front sweeping into a sun-soaked day. "Stop! You are completely out of compliance," she bellowed, storming toward our protest with the authority of a tax collector on the 1st of April. I gazed down from my perch, eyebrow arched in feigned innocence. The sight of her horrified expression was almost enough to send me into a fit of giggles, but professional decorum demanded I put on a show. "Karen, we're just exercising our artistic liberties," I retorted with exaggerated bravado. "Isn't it wonderful to bring a pop of color to such a dreary environment? Lighten up, would you?" My neighbors erupted into a frenzy of laughter, some even offering applause. Who knew that standing on a tarp-covered makeshift roof could warm my heart so splendidly? "Art is subjective, Karen," I taunted playfully, hands on my hips. "You see a violation, but I see a vibrant expression of community." I wasn't using the loudspeaker, but with each word I could sense the crowd behind me, puffing them up with more confidence. Karen, her meticulously styled hair practically quaking with outrage, looked ready to burst into flames. Oh, how I wanted this moment to last. She quickly pulled out her notepad, preparing a barrage of complaints with the frenetic energy of someone who wouldn't last a minute in a barbershop quarter. "You can't just build an art installation on HOA property without filing the proper permits," she screeched, clutching that clipboard like a lifebuoy in a sea of chaos. I scoffed. "You want proper permits for joyful self-expression? That's so last century, Karen." As the sun slid lower in the sky, painting everything in hues of amber and crimson, my rebellious spirit soared higher than I had ever imagined. I climbed onto the rustic balcony we'd fashioned, arms raised victoriously. "We, the creators of this mighty treehouse, a beacon of whimsy, refuse to be shackled by regressive bylaws," I declared with theatrical flair. "Karen, darling, have you ever tried using your powers for good? Perhaps you can appreciate art instead of enforcing restrictions." The crowd erupted, clapping and cheering like we were stars at a rock concert, while Karen's face morphed through the spectrum of rage, disbelief, and utter contempt. It was a performance for the ages, and I was the lead actor directing the entire scene. Yet amidst the laughter and community joy, I felt a twinge of concern creeping through me. Sure, this was fun and games now, but how long would the HOA let us get away with such a shenanigan? I glanced at Max, who was tossing sprinkles of glitter into the air while dancing like nobody was watching. The whole atmosphere was charged with a sense of solidarity. But what if Karen pulled out the big guns? Cease and desist letters were like confetti in her hands. She would rain them down just to assert dominance. For the first time since this chaotic art project exploded, I lost a bit of my bravado and felt an unsettling thought fluttering like an eager butterfly. Were we truly ready to face the consequences? Fueled by both excitement and bubbling anxiety, I steeled my resolve. Perhaps I was only just scratching the surface of a grand narrative, one that juxtaposed youthful creativity against bureaucratic tyranny. The treehouse, while a tremendous act of defiance, was now also a symbol, a war cry for every neighbor who felt stifled by Karen's demands. Max suddenly turned serious, and I knew he sensed the shift in my mood. "If they want a fight, we'll give them one they won't forget," he declared, pumping a fist as if rallying a revolution. "That infectious spirit, I feel a movement brewing here, Jamie." He paused, scratching his beard in mock contemplation, then added, "What do you say we make this treehouse a launchpad for more epic protests?" I knew right then, the way forward was not merely through coalitions of paint, but through assembling the community behind us. What might come next in this glorious, colorful rebellion? The possibilities were endless. With Max buzzing with an energy nothing short of caffeinated squirrels, our mosaic of rebellion felt even more alive. "What if we install a hookah lounge next?" he suggested, laughing at the absurdity while simultaneously nodding vigorously, as if the idea had any merit at all. We could attract a whole new demographic. Imagine the HOA board's faces when they see a group of hipsters drinking overpriced iced lattes while perched amongst our carefully curated greenery. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at the mental image, picturing Karen twitching in her meticulously manicured garden, failing to understand the sheer pinnacle of hipster culture we were attempting to introduce. It was as if our treehouse, once a mere sanctuary, had evolved into a sanctuary for delightful chaos, a cultural haven right above Karen's unsuspecting office. "Okay, but let's be real," I said, catching my breath from laughing. "While I'd love to serve coffee from the treetops and pair it with our rebellious spirit, we've got to establish some ground rules of our own. Creative licensing, if you will." As I surveyed our makeshift paradise, the sunlight flickering through leaves onto our newly painted walls that now sported sporadic masterpieces depicting doves holding tiny protest signs, a sense of responsibility dawned on me. This wasn't just about the vibrant colors splashed against a backyard backdrop. It was a declaration of independence. "We can't descend into complete and utter madness here. Well, at least not yet," I added with mischief dancing in my eyes. Who knew what the friendly neighborhood kids were capable of? And just like that, an idea formed in the back of my mind, a grand plan that screamed chaos while simultaneously promising a good photo op. "How about we host the Treehouse Arts Festival, where everyone showcases creativity in defiance of the HOA?" I exclaimed, the excitement bubbling over. "We could have a mural contest, live poetry readings, interpretive dance battles, the full kit and caboodle." Max's eyes sparkled with exhilaration, and the kids perked up instantly. "You mean like a middle school talent show, but with more paint splatters?" he quipped, stepping back to admire our handiwork. Our neighbors' faces shifted from curious glances to enthusiasm, their attention now focused on this whimsical project that defied the mundanity enforced by Karen's clipboard crackling grip. As the sun dipped lower, carving out a slice of magic in the evening sky, I envisioned the festival. Families gathered, art supplies scattered like confetti across the yard, and a stage built atop the treehouse for Bob, our resident dad joke connoisseur. "Sure have some vision to paint the town, Jamie," he'd say, livening the park while punning like a true amateur. "Who wouldn't want to join in and make a statement?" Can't wait for Karen to show up just to see her world slowly begin to crumble as she's bombarded by twinkling lights, performance art, and that glorious TikTok dance craze. I chuckled, tilting my head to watch the sunsets bleed into every corner of our rebellion. This was thriving in the face of adversity. I spun around, planting my feet firmly on the wooden beams of our newfound utopia, ready to announce the event to the entire neighborhood. "Listen up, folks," I hollered, drawing everyone's attention. "The Treehouse Arts Festival will be our rallying cry, the day of reckoning against property management absurdity. Come on, everything's ready to explode into a full-blown carnival of creativity." The cheers erupted like fireworks against a darkening sky, our audience full of eager faces as emboldened as I felt. Heads nodded in agreement, and I felt a solidarity stronger than the plywood planks we had pieced together. That warm glow of camaraderie rolled through our community like a wave. The treehouse was no longer just a treehouse, it was the centerpiece of our resistance. However, the spark of joy didn't come without a shadow of doubt. The prospect of Karen's wrath hung ominously over our heads. I could practically feel her disapproving glare as if it were a heavy cloak. "What if Karen puts us under lockdown? You think she's going to let this slide without sending a fleet of legal drones?" I whispered to Max, cautious of bursting our exuberant bubble. He shrugged, giving me the kind of enthusiastic grin that suggested he wasn't quite ready to bow to the looming presence of HOA tyranny. "Let them come. We have the bakers, painters, and dancers. If she wants a war, we are armed with creativity, rather than the mundane clipboard that just drags people along." I couldn't help but internally admit he had a point. This was more than a petty dispute. It had become an eruption of artistic community defiance against petty regulations intended to crush our spirits. With plans set, the neighborhood became buzzing with preparations. Paint supplies zigzagged through walkways as neighbors collaborated on costumes, murals, and installations, while whispers of excitement turned into loud laughter. Somewhere within the chaos, Karen's impending tantrum loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon, but we would be ready for her. Ideas and inspiration flowed like bodies at a permitting office escape party, and I felt my heart surge with hope. It wasn't just a treehouse anymore. It was an uprising of whimsy. This was only the beginning of something much bigger than just my humble backyard initiative. It was the blueprint for an entire neighborhood transformed. Who knew how this audacious adventure would unfold? Could we really redefine the restrictions placed on us by the HOA? The answer hung in the air, tantalizingly close. Could we possibly topple an empire built on rules? It was about to get exciting. The dawn of the Treehouse Arts Festival arrived as bright and cheerful as a poppy in a field of gray. As I peeked out my window, I noticed a delightful scene unfolding. Children were weaving between tables draped in vivid fabrics. Parents chatted animatedly while sipping pink lemonade like it was liquid sunshine, and somewhere in the distance, I swear I heard the faint strumming of a ukulele. My heart swelled with uncontainable excitement. This was it. History would be made today, and everyone's artistic flair was ready to shine brighter than the sun itself. This wasn't merely creative expression. This was a veritable revolution blooming right beneath Karen's nose, and I couldn't help but envision her as the villain in one of those crass sitcoms. Fury bubbling like an overcooked pot of spaghetti with her hairdo frozen in a perpetual scowl. As I bustled about, poking my head in on the mural competition, the sight of neighbors splattering bold colors and laughter onto massive canvases invigorated my spirit. Bob was rocking it in a beret that could only be described as artsy scholar meets carnival clown, while he tried, and gloriously failed, to convince a group of kids that this was all about interpreting the planetary impact of gentrification through dip-dye techniques. The splashes of paint, coupled with haphazard brushstrokes, felt like visual poetry erupting right before my eyes. Every smudge told a story, and every gleeful shout punctuated the air like confetti, swirling around us with a contagious fervor that promised an unforgettable day of joy. However, the ensemble of boisterous festivities was instantly dampened by a shadow, quite literally. As I turned, there she stood, Karen, the dark cloud heralding doom wrapped in sensible slacks. My heart sank, fight-or-flight instincts kicking into overdrive as I braced for her imminent and well-rehearsed diatribe about rules, codes, and the audacity of color. "What on earth do you think you're doing?" she screeched, her voice a sharp blade slicing through the jubilant atmosphere. It was nearly as jarring as if an air horn had gone off, and suddenly, all heads turned toward her like sunflowers swiveling to chase the sun, only to be met by the frost. Her eyes darted from one outrageous costume to another, disbelief painting her features as she clutched her imaginary clipboard as if its mere presence could restore order. But I wasn't about to let her monsoon of negativity rain on our parade. With exaggerated confidence, I stepped forward, pointing my paintbrush with the precision of a seasoned archer aiming for the bullseye. "Karen, welcome to the Treehouse Arts Festival. We're gathering community spirits here today, cultivating creativity, and defying the dull rules that have stifled us for too long. Would you like to join us in revolutionizing our dreary existence?" I punctuated the last word with flair, because why not? Her incredulous expression crackled with the potential energy of someone about to explode. "This sort of chaos is unacceptable. You can't simply transform a backyard into a carnival," she stammered, shaking her clipboard as if it were a magic wand, a wand that unfortunately had lost its enchantment somewhere along the way. With everyone watching, I cracked a grin, perhaps too devilishly gleeful, as the absurdity of the situation rushed in. "A carnival? Isn't that a bit flattering?" I took a step closer, enthusiastic mischief dancing through my veins. What better way to embrace community than through collaborative artistic expression? Come sample some paint and unleash your inner child. The surrounding crowd giggled, buoyed by their own defiance against her self-important stance. Max strategically positioned himself behind her like a secret agent, offering goofy thumbs-ups while his beard concealed his laughter. It was as if the universe conspired to distance her from the joy radiating around, her authoritative figure stark against the sea of color and exuberance. The commotion reached a crescendo as other neighbors chimed in, a symphony of chants and rebellious joy rising around Karen. Let her paint! Let her paint!" they called out, and it was almost sweet irony. Karen faced a mob of creative freedom enthusiasts, ready to drown her out with cheer. It was poignant to see how we all rallied for our little slice of freedom, crafting it in vivid splashes of laughter and art, defiantly flouting rules that chained us to mediocrity. Karen's furious mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but her protest fell flat against the jubilant cacophony before her. The neighbors were rallying behind their own little hero, me, wearing a tool belt that might as well have been a superhero's utility harness. Then, I noticed a determined glint in Max's eyes. This was his moment to shine too. He bounded over to Karen, his unruly hair bouncing as he leaned on the flower art station. "Karen, have you ever tried creating art? It's a fantastic stress relief. This could be your big break. You could channel all that pent-up HOA energy into a splashy masterpiece." I stifled a laugh. Max had truly mastered the art of sarcasm wrapped in friendly banter. The crowd erupted, egging on the chaos until Karen began to quiver, her clipboard lowering cautiously, as if entertaining the thought of maybe dipping her toe in our fanciful chaos. And then I seized it, the moment that would forever live in the annals of neighborhood history. "Join us, Karen. We dare you. Let's see you conjure up something as vibrant as your rules," I chirped, challenge pooling in my voice as the crowd cheered wildly in unison, swirling banners of solidarity and artistic fiends around her. No one had ever dared to challenge Karen with such audacity, and neither of us would have expected the inkling of acceptance bouncing around within her stiff regiment. Perhaps draped in a riot of colors, her stern facade might crack. Today would be a glorious day. Would she realize there was power in creativity rather than rules? Could she triumph over her rigid persona and take a leap into this uproarious revolution? The moment hung in suspension, electric with possibilities on the brink of chaos. Karen's eyes narrowed, that stern glare of hers working overtime as she clearly grappled with the idea of abandoning her bureaucratic fortress for something so delightfully chaotic. The crowd buzzed with mischief, taking the challenge and running with it like kids dashing off to a candy store. Whispers rippled through the air. Maybe she'll finally let loose. And what if she really paints? I watched as her lips pressed into a thin line, torn between her rigid principles, and what could possibly be a tiny flicker of curiosity. It was like watching a cat contemplate jumping down from a high shelf. You just knew they wanted to, but the fear of the leap made them hesitate. Against my better judgment, I leaned in with conspiratorial glee. "Come on, Karen, you know you want to." As if summoned by gales of laughter and chaotic cheer, the moment hung in the air. "Maybe I should get her a paintbrush?" I muttered jokingly to Max beside me. He raised an eyebrow in mock contemplation before clapping me on the shoulder, his grin infectious. "Or a canvas. Can you even imagine her with splatters that daring?" The crowd erupted again, a symphony of laughter and light-hearted jeers that felt like a support group for the rebellious at heart. Suddenly, from the depths of my vibrant imagination, an idea struck with the force of a spark, igniting a firestorm. "How about we give her an invitation? Signify the start of her artistic journey to unleash her inner Picasso," I hollered, gesturing dramatically as if I were pitching a movie idea to a room full of producers. Before I knew it, someone had scuttled off to find a piece of canvas, while another neighbor squished up some paint tubes as the chorus of our wild imagination grew louder than the ludicrous mirth swirling around us. In that spontaneous flurry of enthusiasm, I scanned the area, catching the telltale signs of chaos brewing. A makeshift stage of discarded crates was forming, and neighbors rushed to gather props, paint, and anything remotely artistic to thrust upon our reluctant HOA czarina. I silently grinned, relishing the madness unfolding like a tapestry spun from vibrant wildflowers, each thread a testament to our community's readiness to burst from the conventional bloom of Karen's stringent HOA ideals. I clapped dramatically. "Let's gift her this canvas, shall we? A blank slate for a fresh start. And that clipboard? It'll become a paint mixer." As murmurs of excitement engulfed the crowd, sprinkles of whipped-up absurdity induced gales of laughter. I spotted tiny Chloe, armed with a handful of glitter and enthusiasm, bustling over with wide, innocent eyes. "Can we give her sparkles?" she chirped, her little hands outstretched in gleeful determination. Just as I was about to agree that sparkles would definitely ease the transition into artistic freedom, Karen's fortress finally cracked, a reluctant smile flickering to life like the serendipitous dawn breaking through a long, stormy night. It transformed her stringent expression into resembling that of a curious toddler eyeing candy through glass. My breath caught in surprise. But hey, even steel enters the world of malleability when subjected to enough heat. Max nudged me and whispered, "I feel like a mad scientist here. We might just create a perfect storm of color and fury." The sight of power-hungry Karen, ankle-deep in the creative chaos, was delightful yet bewildering. As we tightened the noose gently around her staunch regiment, the crowd shouted, "Karen, join us! Let's see your masterpiece!" The chains of ordinariness were ringing alarm bells in the pit of her gut as she stood on the precipice of transforming from the queen of restrictions to artistic enigma. Karen remained silent a moment too long, and lengths of paintbrushes twirled before her, a veritable arsenal of colorful rebellion ready to embrace her. Finally, she reached for the canvas, her hand dry and trembling while I stifled a loud gasp. The world around us paused. The air grew thick with anticipation, a visible tension. It was as if every creative bone in our collective bodies held its breath, ready to erupt into applause or tumble into chaos. Karen hovered over the canvas, her face an expressive tapestry of confusion, and, just when the gleam of hope sparked brightest, she lifted a palette of shocking pink paint, smearing it onto the canvas with all the grace of a toddler wrestling with a pudding cup. Gasps followed, and amidst a ricochet of laughter that echoed into the sunny sky, I couldn't help but clap like a fevered game show host. Yes, Karen, break free, embrace the chaos. Her paint smeared wildly across the pristine white surface, forming something that vaguely resembled what could only be described as an abstract representation of a stormy sea. As my neighbors cheered her on like she was Michelangelo unveiling the Sistine Chapel, I felt every tangled nerve in my body unwind, releasing the infectious energy of empowerment that flowed through our little oasis of creativity. Who could have believed that under layers of authoritarian resolve lay the potential for unrestrained self-expression? "Now that's a color palette for the ages," I shouted, adding my own splash of paint to the artistic cacophony. Would we see more colorful quirks emerging from the barricade of suburban conformity? Would this newfound exhilaration spark a change on our hedge-tamed streets forever? Only time could tell, but one thing was certain. The HOA's rules had met their match today. Amidst the colorful chaos erupting around me, there was a sudden hush. It was as if the universe itself paused, holding its breath in mutual disbelief. Karen, our erstwhile enforcer of the HOA's irrational regulations, was now a rogue artist flinging paint like a tornado in a nursery. I had to admit, her stormy abstraction, now doused with a vibrant collection of bright colors, looked like something a genius would create after a bender of caffeine and existential dread. My neighbors were going wild, forming an impromptu gallery right there in the HOA meeting room, erupting into a riot of applause and laughter, bargaining for her next brushstroke like die-hard fans awaiting a rock star's encore. "You call that a storm, Karen?" Max shouted over the delightful din. "I see a masterpiece brewing." The sight of our formerly oppressive HOA head and her bone-dry clipboard transformed into an instrument of creativity brought an uncontainable grin to my face. Karen, the quintessential villain who had demolished my beloved treehouse without a second thought, was now caught in her own spontaneous rebirth. Who knew that all it would take was a hint of absurdity to bring out the surreal artist locked within? The realization struck me like a wayward pine cone hitting a windshield. What if reclaiming our spaces meant inviting chaos, laughter, and pure, unadulterated joy back into our community? I felt optimistic, almost poetic, a wild contrast to just weeks ago when I was facing her with a PowerPoint presentation and a trembling voice in that very room. As the paint continued to splatter, art supplies erupted into a whirlwind of color, creating an aura of rebellion that stirred the collective imagination of every neighbor. I watched as Chloe handed Karen every color of the rainbow, her eyes sparkling with excitement and mischief. Max rubbed his hands together conspiratorially. "We should get her some glow in the dark paint. Just think about how she'll leave her mark on this oppressive little HOA of ours," he cackled, the sound mingling with the rumblings of laughter from the assembled gallery. Could we truly turn the HOA on its head? Could we transform an entire neighborhood into a veritable playground of radical self-expression? As the thought rippled through me, empowerment surged through my veins, and I cheered louder than ever. "Get it, Karen! Let your true colors shine!" Then, in what I can only envision as an accidental masterpiece of inebriated revelation, Karen swung her paintbrush like a rock star at a concert. Her strokes were erratic but full of intention, words forming in bursts of rebellion as colors crashed together. A few home improvement committee members, who'd arrived burdened with resentment and too many rulebooks, exchanged bewildered glances, their meticulously groomed glares melting into tentative smiles, unsure whether to join the creative revolution or retreat back behind the walls of their carefully constructed conformity. One brave soul, a middle-aged man named Gary, stepped forward, spatula in hand. "Hey, can I try? I have a really great idea." Was the impossible happening right in front of me? A once stoic HOA committee member daring to dip his toe into an ocean of creative freedom? It felt surreal. What began as chaos morphed into a community celebration. We made the space an oasis of vibrant voices, all under the approving eyes of our moms, dressed in sensible mom jeans, wielding picnic baskets overflowing with snacks and refreshing lemonade, who now provided nourishment for our artistic brilliance. The edges of creativity crept into the sidewalks, draping the forgotten corners of our suburb with bold strokes of community joy. "Grab some more paint, Jamie. We need to cover that boring no parking sign," someone shouted. And before I could blink, the sign became an art project dubbed Embrace the Chaos. I wielded a brush, feelers of mischief tingling as I transferred my pent-up creative energy into each stroke. If Karen could embrace chaos with open arms, so could we. As the impromptu event escalated, the original creators of my lifting ire morphing into optimistic allies, I caught Karen eyeing her neighbors with what could only be interpreted as a shaky truce. Laughter filled the air, banishing the gloom of her clipboard-wielding tyranny and perhaps exposing a sliver of humanity beneath her steely facade. "Maybe it's time for the HOA to reconsider some of its antiquated rules," I mused, the energy of our rebellion soaring like balloons on a summer breeze. After all, would anyone hold a clipboard over a kindergarten art exhibit? "Art can't be contained," I hollered, and together we embraced the riot of color spilling over every quadrant of our suburban landscape. Where rules once stood fiercely like the Great Wall of China, now wobbly canvases flapped with laughter and rebellion. But as I reveled in the joyous storm ignited by the power of absurdity, I felt a pang of delight. Sure, we'd unleashed a riot in the heart of Karen's domain, but amidst the whirlwind, the thought struck me, what would they think tomorrow? While the paint stroked colors of chaos and creativity over their monotonous lives, what capers could the HOA dig up to retaliate? Sure, Karen had dipped her toes in paint for the first time, but would she embrace this avant-garde life or summon her inner authoritarian? A challenge brewed in the depths of my mind. Oh, what an intoxicating ride this burgeoning art rebellion was turning out to be. The tempest of color had yet to settle, and the real questions flickered on the horizon. Would this spark an art revolution in the HOA, or would we find ourselves at war once more? The answers might just surprise us all. As the kaleidoscopic outburst of creativity settled around us, I found myself perched atop a sea of freshly painted canvases, an oasis of defiance blooming in what was once a gray, lifeless HOA room. My mind buzzed with electric possibilities. Max leaned in close, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "You know, Jamie, I think we just accidentally started an art revolution. What's next? A Treehouse art gallery extravaganza?" Every word dripped with enthusiasm, and I couldn't help but envision it, my beloved Treehouse. Not merely restored but adorned with works of art, the final bastion against Karen's regiment of rules. Could we elevate our community's artistic flair above the tyranny of entitled homeowners? I snickered, imagining our neighbors parading through a gallery of avant-garde expressions featuring literal protest art right on Karen's lawn. How glorious it would be to turn her professional clipboard into a canvas of its own. But then, like thunder rolling through a clear sky, a wave of panic flitted through my mind. The HOA wasn't just going to sit back and let whimsical creative free-for-alls happen without a fight. I could see Karen now, her slender fingers gripping that infernal clipboard tighter, marking non-compliance as if she were tallying the number of sins she could punish. Would she rally the troops of the HOA? With images of territorial war games dancing in my imagination, I started scheming in earnest. What if we turned this art day into an official community project, backed by, get this, the power of social media? A glimmer of inspiration struck me like a particularly sharp paintbrush. I envisioned flyers plastered across every mailbox, daring every individual in our neighborhood to contribute. Surely nothing would be more effective at blinding the HOA with creative joy than an unorthodox art exhibit to flaunt right on their doorstep. With every bursting idea, I rallied my fellow painters. "All right, team, here's the plan. We need to seek out every artistic soul in this neighborhood. Let's throw an open call for submissions. We'll turn our homes, and by extension the HOA's headquarters, into a vibrant celebration of local artistry." We huddled together, brimming with passion. My mind raced with visions of abstract depictions of lawnmowers and social commentary on our overly manicured lawns. I had it all: newsletters to neighbors, invites on social platforms, and a stream of defiance bubbling under the surface. Max slapped my back with exuberance. "I'm all in, but can we add Defiant Treehouse to the list of mandatory exhibits?" His laughter was contagious, and the impossible felt possible. Who wouldn't love a swing and a restroom sign painted like a bathroom in a Parisian cafe? We could be the avant-garde anarchists and earn one hell of a reputation. As ideas spilled forth like an uncontrollable paint cascade, I felt the shared camaraderie take root in our community. Each twist conceived a new theme, the absurdity of HOAs, followed by art for freedom. Could we really mobilize against the restrictions that stifled our collective spirit? With rise in confidence, we put up hastily made flyers around the neighborhood, art supplies extracted from garages and basements, while creative juices flowed more freely than the lemonade our moms were serving. Soon, I stood in my yard, surrounded by neighbors, some with paintbrushes, others just basking in the disbelief that they could indeed yell back at the overlords of their suburban mundane. The air was thick with rebellion, creativity crackling with every splashed stroke on our makeshift canvases. "Let's decorate the sidewalks too," I shouted, more exhilarated than I thought possible. "And don't forget those boring neighbor watch your lawn signs." The energy was palpable, and we had inadvertently sparked something unprecedented, a community unlocking its collective potential. I could see Karen now, pacing within the confines of her abode, frantically flipping through her HOA book. But armed with creativity, we morphed our fear into a triumph of expression. "We dare you to extinguish our passion, Karen," I proclaimed, standing on the dilapidated remains of my poor treehouse being resurrected in spirit. Every shout, each paint splatter was a playful jab at her imperial existence. Underneath all the vibrant colors and uninhibited joy, a movement was unfolding, shaping the future of our neighborhood to reclaim the narrative from the claws of petty entitlement. As the day melted into evening, the sunset cast our work in golden glow, and I took a moment to survey our grand progress, the cacophony of laughter, the vivid colors vying for attention, and the palpable joy that hung thick in the air, below the watchful eyes of my neighbors and their bizarrely judgmental lawns. At that point, I knew that we had unearthed something far grander than a treehouse or beautiful paintings. We had unearthed a collective voice. Our act of defiance had shifted a paradigm, unmasking the absurdity of bureaucratic limitations and celebrating unfiltered creativity instead. Art in all its glorious forms. And as I turned to my makeshift art committee, fueled by passion and a riot of color, the embodiment of our newfound allegiance rang clear. Who's in for an art revolution on top of Karen's office? In that fiery moment, I felt like the architect of dreams ready to rise anew, the audacity of hope twinkling in each paint-stained hand across our community. The atmosphere buzzed loudly with excitement, as I realized that we, the unconventional artists, had become the very heart of this town, a heart that would beat defiantly against the stifling winds of conformity. If liberation meant standing atop an office, then perhaps Karen would finally see our vision, not merely trees and homes, but a canvas ignited by passion and rebellion, making way for brighter tomorrows and the art of living unapologetically.